Next up, we have an exclusive study for you into the shopping trends and habits of the cruise consumer post-COVID-19. The research will detail how cruise passengers are feeling about going back on a cruise and what their expectations are for the retail environment. And I'll now hand you over to Peter Mohn of m1nd-set.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Kapila, and also very interesting presentation, Lisa, and very interesting to hear how your strategy, what you're adapting and what you're doing right now, because very much of what I'm going to show now, after talking to the travelers, you will actually see very much will be confirmed in the research we have conducted. Just a quick introduction of m1nd-set for those who don't know the company. We are the leading research agency for the travel industry. Most of our business are at airports. We also work for the 25 major airlines around the world, but also we conduct research for the cruise and ferry industry and border shops, etc. So that's what we do. We work for around 100 brands. So we are very well known in this industry, so I won't spend too much time on this because I have very much research to share with you. We conducted research in March this year, so the information you will see in the first part of my presentation is actually related to what people thought before the COVID was struck. And we did conduct, I just should move on, exactly. So we did conduct interviews with 1,200 cruise travelers, and with a nice split between travelers from Asia, America, and Europe. And all these people had been on a cruise in the last 6 months, and we conducted this in an online survey to get insights of their understanding, their expectations. Well, the most important aspect always for industry is to understand what is the footfall and conversion rate. So how many people actually go into the shops and how many people do then buy something. You can see that you see those little small black boxes, which is always the reference to airports, in case you're interested in that. But overall, you can say that 75% of the people we talked to actually did go into the duty-free shops. And this actually the highest was in Asia Pacific, the lowest in the Americas. And very interestingly, almost 90%, so 9 out of 10 actually did buy something, which is of course much higher compared to the airports, which is around between 50 and 60% depending on the airport where you are. So this leads then that 2 out of 3 people actually bought something on their latest trip. Well, of course, unlike airports, and as Lisa also highlighted, travelers quite often return to the shops. And an average almost 3 visits was occurring during the last cruise ship that they conducted. And you can see that some did in the very beginning of the cruise, but the majority did it in the middle of the cruise, so in between when they actually got to know the ship a little bit more. And then around half of the people went back again at the very end of the cruise ship. And quite interesting to see that especially at the end was the most popular thing to do among Europeans. But overall, you can see interesting distribution between the different phases of their trip. Now, if we look into the duty-free buyers, we asked them, who did you buy your products for? And we asked for each of the products that they bought. And as you of course can imagine, there will be quite a big difference between their categories. But just to give you an overall view of who people buy for, and you can see that 53% of those who bought an item, at least one item, bought it for themselves, which is much higher compared to airports. And 28 said to share, and 15% mentioned as a gift. And which is quite funny because gifting is around 43% at airports around the world, and here only 15%. And the highest share of self-consumption, or for myself, is amongst the American cruise travelers. If you dig a little bit deeper into the self purchases, you can see that 1/3 of those who did that mainly bought for themselves. And of course, the categories number 1 and 2 were jewelry and watches, but also fashion. But also then around every 10th person said it would be for immediate consumption usage, and which was of course throwing tobacco, or to stock up at home, which is mainly in alcohol and tobacco. And those who actually bought for themselves were mainly people buying in tobacco, alcohol, media, and fashion. People also bought to share, and you can see that around 28% bought something to share, and they mainly would share it back home, or then also on board the cruise or at the final destination. And those who bought as a gift, and majority of them would to give it to the certain person in an informal setting, mainly of course souvenirs, and a very small amount gave it actually in a formal setting. And again, this of course varies a lot depending on the category. It just gives you an overall view of the situation. Well, this is one of the charts I find very interesting because we ask about the overall planning level. And you can see that overall there was some sort of planning among 7 out of 10 shoppers who bought something, and it's definitely the highest in Asia Pacific, whereas in Europe and Americas is much lower. But if you look on the right side of the chart, you can see there's quite some differences in what does it mean, the planning. And you can see that most or 30% said, well, they plan to buy something in a category, but without any specific idea, followed by plan to buy something in a category and had some ideas of the type of product I wanted. And only very, very few people, only 13%, so roughly every 7th person, knew exactly which specific brand or product they wanted to buy. And then you had 29% buying completely on impulse. So you can see here, a lot of people actually take their final decision inside the shop. And here we have just a quick overview of the main purchase drivers of those people who bought something. Well, number one is not surprisingly, it offered good value for money, which is very similar to the number we see also at airports. And convenience is also very important. And like Lisa also mentioned earlier, people like to buy their favorite brands. And also here, this was of course the case. People like to go back to the brands that they know, that they're favorites. And interesting, around every quarter, every fourth person said it was a perfect souvenir for my trip, and which is much, much higher compared to the airports. And which is also nice, encouraging here. You can see that the sales staff helped me find the product I was looking for, and I had enough time to choose, of course, which is quite a high number. But it also shows that the sales staff perception is positive because they strongly influence the purchase decision. And I will show you a little bit more about that in a minute. And then, of course, which is also important, I guess, for all of you to see how many people actually compare the prices inside the store. And you can see roughly 2 out of 3 in our survey say that they compare prices in store using their mobile phones. Well, this is very, very strongly driven by the passengers from Asia Pacific, because here it's 84% and versus around every second person in Europe and America. So very, very strongly people in Asia Pacific do search a lot, and also especially the Chinese do this, and we see that also in other channels that the Chinese and the people from Asia Pacific tend to inform themselves very, very much and compare the prices. And as we also heard earlier, that products, duty-free exclusive products, are very frequent on cruises. It's much less frequent in other channels in travel retail. But you can see that 2 out of 3 actually did buy duty-free exclusives, unique products. And again, here, very, very strongly driven by the shoppers from Asia Pacific. Now, the role of experiential retail is significant. And as Lisa mentioned also earlier, it will increase even further. But let's take a step back and see, we looked at the overall satisfaction of different aspects of the shop that they visited. And you could see that the overall satisfaction level is at 4.2 on a scale from 1 to 5, so pretty high, and also much higher compared to what we see at airports around the world. And what were the people the most satisfied with? Well, they liked the atmosphere in the shop, the design, the layout of the shop they went through, and also the service level is perceived as very, very positive. The aspects they're the least satisfied with is the technology offer. So how can I inform myself in advance what's available on certain apps, etc. And also the range of affordable products is relatively low. And also the fact that they are missing a bit more of a local touch. Products, packaging that has more of a sense of place, a local touch, which could be improved. Well, then we asked them about their different aspects about their visits. And they actually agreed. You can see here the amount of people who agreed into the following statements. And overall, the people were really satisfied to say they were easy to find products. It's easy and very convenient to navigate through the shop. I easily find what I'm looking for. The ads, the communication are in languages I understand, and the promotions are clearly highlighted. So the whole communication area is very, very positively perceived, and also they find the shops visually appealing. And also when there were unique products and exclusive, they were very well highlighted and clearly seen by the travelers. If you go all the way down, you can see that the least satisfied aspect was the clear communication savings compared to my home country. So people were not so clear about how much do I save compared to the home country. So here maybe the advice, it would be good to maybe have some small examples here and there, how much it costs domestically on average in a certain country, in a certain region, and how much would they save when they buy on board. So this is something that was the least positive. Interesting is here when we asked them, do you think something was missing in the section of the duty-free shop? And only 15% said that that something was missing, and which is a really low number, because usually people tend to be a little bit more critical. And we could see that mainly there was a specific product or certain size they were looking for, of course, which is understandable because the amount, the space is limited. But what I find specifically interesting is that almost 1/3 of people said, I would like to have more products with a local touch, so the sense of place aspect comes up again. And also, like Lisa mentioned earlier, the free samples is something that people really like to see more of, and that's something that's appreciated. That's also something they would expect a little bit more when they go on a cruise, because they have time to try new things, new brands, new line extension they don't know yet, and also they would like to see more exclusive products. So again, this differentiation from the domestic markets, products I cannot buy at Macy's, etc., would be more appreciated among those who were a little bit dissatisfied regarding what was available. And as we all know, the duty-free shoppers tend to try and to taste products inside the shop, and they like to be influenced by this experience, and it actually has quite a strong impact on their final decisions. You can say that people really like to interact, and especially in the fashion and jewelry and watches section, they'd like to know, to learn, to discuss with the sales advisors. And this is especially very, very strong in Asia Pacific, and much lower in Europe, almost like a half if you look at the amount of people who did that. But interestingly, that 77% said, well, those who actually tried and tasted products, they were influenced by the experience on the final decision to purchase. So this is something which is very, very important for the duty-free shoppers and should definitely be taken into consideration in your communication and marketing strategy. Coming to the sales staff, which play an important role, we can see that around 2 out of 3 interacted by the sales staff. Around half of them were approached by the sales staff, and about half of them did actually approach them themselves. And again, here, there are very, very big differences between the regions. You can see in Asia Pacific, the interaction was much, much higher. More than 8 out of 10 did interact, whereas in Europe, it was roughly every second. And you can see those who interacted with the sales staff were influenced by the staff on their final decision. So you can see those who actually interacted were much more likely to choose a product. They helped them actually to choose between different products, or actually sometimes even bought something different compared to what they were planning on buying. So again, here, the role and the training of the sales staff is very, very crucial regarding the shopping basket. And if we look at the evaluation of the sales staff, it's very, very high. Very seldom I see numbers like this, that you can see that almost 9 out of 10 say they were proactive and helpful, they were knowledgeable, they provided useful and relevant information. And we see much, much lower numbers at most of the airports around the world. So this is congratulations to those training the sales staff, because the perception of the duty-free shoppers is extremely positive. Look at the different touch points. It's something also Kapila and Lisa discussed earlier, which has become more and more important. And you can see that around 3 out of 10 of the travelers did actually research information about duty-free products prior to the trip. And this is strongly driven by the cruise travelers from Asia Pacific, where it's over 50%, whereas in Europe and in Americas, it's around every 5th person. So here, quite a low number who actually did inform themselves. But if they did, the main research information was done online. So if they did so, almost 9 out of 10 did so, and it was on the online search engine, social media, the brand websites. And again, Asia Pacific was much more active in using different sources and finding information. And if they did not do it online, you could see it was mainly done inside the stores, the information on the packaging from the sales staff, ads in the shops, and also offline ads, like checked information on the ads inside the stores or looked at magazines. So again, they basically they use a lot of different sources. And if you are into this, how to spend your advertising and your communication strategy, it will be important for you to take a little bit closer look into these two charts I just showed you. And again, they liked, prior to the trip, they like to look at the, they would prefer to look at the duty-free shop website. So it'd be important to communicate to the travelers where can they find a website. It should be easy to access it or to find it, because they would like to look into this. Or also if there would be specific applications for mobiles, tablets, and a little bit lower share of people would like to have an email while they're booking, and 10% said, well, a paper catalog would be something they would like to look into. On board, however, they also would like to see an application that they can use on their mobile phones or their tablet. This would definitely be the number one to invest on if possible, so people can do that. And around every second person said that they were actually would interested in getting information through social media. And this is, again, strongly driven through the travelers from Asia Pacific. Then we checked different ways of ordering or to delivery of the products. And the most popular approach would be to buy in the duty-free shop on board and have the products and deliver directly to your room. That's what almost 6 out of 10 like the most. And then you have a little bit less acceptance of those who would like to pre-order products online and then pick them up in the duty-free shop on board. That was the least liked. But again, all of them have a certain group of people who are interested in these kind of different delivery services. And if you then go to the post-COVID research, Kapila contacted me a few months ago and she asked if we could do a specific research for this webinar. So we, as late as possible, so in October last month, we conducted 600 interviews with cruise travelers from Asia, America, and Europe to see how the perception is nowadays, what are their plans for the future. And so we talked to people who actually had been on a cruise for the last 12 months and who are willing to go on a cruise again in the next 2 years. And so we wanted to see what is their interest, what are they looking into. And what you can see, which also confirms what Lisa mentioned earlier, you can see that 56% said, well, I would more or less go immediately on a cruise ship when I can again. And 10% said, well, I would go immediately when I can. And a little bit, almost half said, well, not immediately, but within the first 6 months, because I need to plan a bit, of course, and to see how the situation is. So very, very encouraging numbers of amount of people who would like to travel within the first 6 months. And then you have around a quarter of the people who said that they would probably travel between 6 months but before 1 year. And only 21% said they would actually go after 1 year, but before 2 years. And these numbers are also much more positive compared to what we saw regarding the air travel. So interesting to see, and very supporting, encouraging information. And then we asked them, would you actually refrain visiting the duty-free shop because of the pandemic? And fortunately, only 18% said yes, they would actually consider they would rather not go. And then we would ask them, which of these categories would probably suffer the most, or would you most likely spend less on? And the number one was the jewelry, watches, probably because of less budget available, but also because of the testing situation, the skincare and makeup, but also toys are probably the products that would suffer the most in this sense. But the most positive outlook regarding what they would continue purchasing as normal would be for alcohol, confectionery, tobacco, and souvenirs. So here they were very positive that they will continue shopping in these categories as they used to. And also the majority actually said they would interact with the sales staff. They would not stop avoiding actually interacting with them. Also because they're assuming that they would be measures, people would be wearing a mask, and they would be a little bit more careful maybe, but the majority would like to still interact with the sales staff, which we think is a very positive number to see. We can see here. And also almost 8 out of 10 would say, well, actually, I wouldn't mind testing or trying products if it's done in a clean way, disinfectants available. Actually, only 22% said they would actually completely avoid testing products completely. And then we asked them, would you actually be interested in doing pre-ordering? And you can see that about 49% are willing to shop online, to pre-order online. And this is also mainly in Asia Pacific and much lower in Europe. And the most frequently mentioned pickup points, which they would prefer, within, as we mentioned earlier, in the room on board the cruise ships, but also within the duty-free shop on board the cruise ship, and then followed by home address or the port of arrival. But definitely delivery in the room is actually what is consistently preferred. And then we asked them, do you think you would actually change your habits on board compared to how you were before the COVID-19 outbreak? And you can see that around 3 out of 4 said they would change their behavior, and especially in Asia Pacific, which almost 90% said so. And what would they mainly do? What would they change? We want to know a little bit more. And the most frequent action was to say, well, I would try to isolate myself from the crowds. I would probably try to interact a bit less with other passengers. And so they would be spend more time reading or, watching movies or spending more time on tablets, a little bit isolating myself from the others. And so that's quite interesting to see how people are planning to adapt. They would like to go back on the cruises, but a little bit more cautious of trying to avoid the crowds, which is very understandable. Well, and then we also wanted to see how would you behave regarding these aspects when you want to collect information about the products and brands? Which source? How would you like to get that information? And they said, well, number one would still be talking to the sales staff, and then followed by scanning a QR code using a mobile phone where you can get more background information. And if you want to check the availability of the products in the store, they would actually mainly prefer to check on the digital kiosk inside the store, see what's available, and then ask the sales staff. And thirdly, if you want to compare prices, they would look to also use the QR code on their phone or check a digital kiosk inside the shop. But also and we asked them, what would you be the preferred way when actually paying the products when you're checking out? And number one would be actually to use payment apps, or then to pay directly at the cashier. So still, at the end, the people trust. In 3 out of 4, they would still interact with the people, and they feel comfortable that the cruise ships take care of the safety and the health regulations. So they wouldn't really avoid wanting to do that, which I think is great news. So I've talked rather fast because I had so much information and I had to stay within my 25 minutes. So I'm almost done. I just want to quickly highlight our conclusions that we could find. And you can see very high footfall and conversion figures at the airport. So overall, the situation is very, very positive. And you can see people still would like to go on multiple shopping occasions and go on several trips per year if they can afford it. And the satisfaction levels are very, very positive. And for sure, they would like to go back and spend time and spend their money and go on a cruise ship whenever they can again. And also we think the feedback regarding the engagement regarding going back again on a cruise in a post-COVID world was very, very positive. And this also confirms what Lisa mentioned earlier regarding people really would like to go back. And also this is reflected in the bookings that we have seen. Then we can look into the different communication with travelers, different options how to do so. And you can see that the majority of the people pre-plan their purchases, and although it's more on a general level. And so it's very, very important for the brands and for the retailers to be there to have an online strategy how to communicate with the cruise passengers before and during their travel, so they can inform themselves, because also they tend to probably want to reduce their time inside the shop a little bit more. So it's therefore very, very important to adapt the pre-trip touch points to the actual planning level to make sure there's a high really and clear exposure to the pre-trip touch points, and that will actually then make sure that people are more likely to consider the brands you're representing, and therefore also increase the purchase intention for the travelers. And then it's very, very important also to increase the experimental retail. So we think it's important that people have a great experience. So we think that if they have a good experience inside the shop, it's interactive, it's entertaining. If they are feel that they're impressed and they are maybe also inspired by new ideas with sampling or testing, it could be personally, it could also be digitally. With the treatment advices and also with the virtual reality, augmented reality, it would really be strongly appreciated by the shoppers. I think this is a key conclusion of the research we did. So anybody who is hesitating in investing in this, we think this would really be a great return on investment if you could focus on that. And then if you come back to my last page, which I would just like to highlight, what is available, you can see that the majority would like to go back on a cruise ship in the first 6 months. And again, it would be very, very important to optimize the time spent in the shops, because people will probably spend a little bit less time. But if you do it in an engaging and efficient way, it will be positive, and people will probably return to the shop 2 or 3 times during the trip. So that will be very, very positively perceived. And if you ensure that you have a proactive and helpful staff, and also have the certain innovative elements that really show that you're fully aware of the COVID situation, you provide the safety, the clean environment, and the sampling in the right way, people will actually appreciate it very much and probably have a bigger shopping basket. And it will be then important to intensify the pre-trip touch points and to make sure that you have these different platforms so people are well informed before the trip and on board, but also then the people will have the chance to engage and to be inspired and to enjoy the shopping experience. And the pockets are probably quite willing to be spent full of money, and they will be happy to spend it if they're treated in the right way, and if they're being inspired inside the shop and by the sales staff. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Peter. Some really great insights there, and we have time for a few quick questions. And basically, obviously, we've got a lot of questions from some of the newcomers into the industry that you mentioned before, and they're interested in finding out how much of appetite there is for new and small brands, and for the cruise sector to possibly move away from the big brands, include them as well, and their chances for finding a position in this market. What do you see from the customer point of view in terms of what they're looking for? Are they looking for newness? And obviously a lot of them are doing their research, but coming into the stores and buying without any planning at all.
Well, I'm sure that the big brands will always be very important and relevant. However, we think the mix is actually ideal, because the travelers on cruise ships, they are open for new things. They are in holiday mood. They would like to explore things. And that's also one of the key things I said that's missing sometimes, that they would like to see more new exclusives, also be inspired and maybe have a little bit more of a local touch. So anything, even for bigger brands, it can be if you add some local touch to the packaging, and for the smaller brands, if they do it in a smart way, I think they can be successful in being a little bit different compared to what they're offering in the domestic channel. And I think definitely, I think it would be encouraging to invest in this channel, because again, people are more open-minded or more open to trying new things when they're on traveling, and especially since they've been in a lockdown situation or not being able to go out and explore very much in the last couple of months or the last year almost. So I think they would definitely be open to try new, smaller brands they're not aware of.
Okay. I was actually surprised when I saw that there was just a very small share of people knowing exactly what they wanted to buy when in the shop, and the majority decided once in store. So What do you think that means for retailers in terms of how they communicate to travelers pre-cruise?
Yeah, although my job is talking to travelers and all around the world, I've been doing this for a long time. I was also quite surprised to see how few people really knew I'm going to buy this product, this brand beforehand. It was only a very small part actually. So this again shows how people can be influenced with in-store merchandising, especially with great sales advisors. And I think it shows how important it is to focus on what you offer and the experiments and the experience that they will have inside the shop. So I think that's a great opportunity to that. But I also think it shows that what is currently available is not so clear to the shoppers regarding online pre-information. Where do I find a website? Is there any app I can use? So maybe that's an opportunity for improvement. So how you can communicate that stronger pre-trip, so they can inform themselves, maybe share that with their friends and family to see, okay, well, this is going to be available. Should I buy this for you? So I think that's something that shows there is an opportunity to improve that, but also it shows how very, very important it still is to create a positive atmosphere within the shop. And the cruises are doing a great job overall, but still there is space for improvement.
Right, okay. And on that note, in terms of improvement, do you have some final, I guess, headline points in terms of the recommendations that you have based on your research on the general assortment, the service, and the communication with guests?
Yeah, I do think it's important to have a good mix, like I mentioned earlier, and also Lisa mentioned that in her presentation. It's important to have the favorite brands of the people who are traveling, but it's very, very important to also have maybe a certain kind of rotation, some new inspirational concepts, ideas, products, also so people can learn about something. Maybe it's some relevance to the area, the region, or the country they're traveling through. That can be just through a screen, could be a QR code, information they can get. I think people would really appreciate that. So if I would be a brand, I would really try to see how can I focusing on differentiating compared to what I'm offering domestically, and ideally relating it a bit to traveling and being on a boat and being in a holiday mood. So I think that's what I would mainly focus on if I were a brand.
Great. Thank you. Brilliant, Peter. And thanks for sharing this valuable research with us. The presentation will be available to delegates to download following the seminar. So thank you again.
Thank you.